Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon on a Wednesday. As we're admitting people, let's get interactive in the chat and get comfortable with it. So for those who want to share where you are joining us from, please let us know in the chat. I always like to see how people got connected to the events and where they're calling us in from. So obviously, I am speaking to you all from Iowa. Are we officially live now?
Yes, we're just gonna keep letting folks in.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to make sure. Yes, yeah. Los Angeles. I have a foot and a half of snow. I could go to Los Angeles. So we have Maddie from Denver, Colorado, Houston. Oh yeah, we have Indianapolis. We have a lot of different places. Los Angeles, New York, DC, yes. This is great. Yes, and thank you all for joining us. This was an event that was, quickly pulled together because we know that this conversation is urgent to have. And we have been watching what the administration has been dropping over the last couple of days. And we're excited to see how they move forward with some of the promises that they had in the campaign trail. But as well, there's always good to have pressure and keeping people's feet to the fire when they promise certain things and making sure that obviously the young people who helped get young Joe Biden into the administration have some form of say and are brought to the table when it comes to some of these discussions. Wow, we have people from all over. Yes. Anyone from Chicago? I haven't seen anyone from Chicago. That's my hometown. All righty. West Side Atlanta. Yep. All righty. So let's get started. We have a lot of things on our for the event today. And I want to make sure that we have enough time to go through all of it. I most likely will have to go a little bit over time, but that's totally fine because this is gonna go by super quickly. So to begin, I'm actually going to transition it over to my right hand, Dylan, to give us a little bit of welcomes and partner shout outs.
Thank you so much, Marlon. Okay. Things on the screen. Thank you so much, Marlon. So I'm excited about being in conversation with all of you. Welcome to the 4 Years We Need, a youth-led and youth-produced panel discussion. Tonight will be kind of a jam-packed 90 minutes or more. And tonight is intentionally intergenerational. As we've been saying, after the insurrection, and as we jumped into the new administration, some folks on our team did some ideation around what a space like this would look like. And tonight is the result of that. So the curator of tonight's event is the Future We Need, which is a youth-led, youth-produced social media campaign documenting the stories of youth power. This campaign's founding partners include Casey Family Programs, the Forum for Youth Investment, the Forum's Storytelling Arms for Action, and the Aspen Institute Forum for Community Solutions. And tonight's event is in partnership with those key founding partners, plus 18 by Vote, Center for Native American Youth, Content by Us, Corridor Community Action Network, Future Coalition, National Youth Employment Coalition, Opportunity Youth United, Pride in Running, Student Voice, Voices Corporation, and Young People For. So you have a lot of great partners along the list. So thank you to all of those partners who made tonight's event possible, and all those organizations and their call to actions are linked on the webpage on futureweneed.org/RSVP at the very bottom. And now I'll pass it back to Marlon to do some general maintenance and next steps.
Sounds good. Of course, there's always going to be a little bit of housekeeping rules and some goals. So obviously for all of you all joining us, what does tonight look like? This very special space that we're holding for young people. Like, so what is the goals of today's discussion? One of many, we hope, in partnership with all of you all. So obviously the first thing, as you can see on the slide, is to address the impact of the pandemic on a lot of opportunities for young people that lacked before we had this crisis and are continuing to get worse for a lot of our generation. Looking at the last 4 years of youth power, it's not only looking at the problems, but also looking at the silver linings of how with everything that we have been going through, yet young people continue to be dynamic and resilient in the way that they organize, and especially the last 4 years when we really had to hold the line of defense to make sure that we didn't really go back 10 steps. And also where we're going from here, right? There's been a lot of, there's room to breathe, but we have a lot of work to continue to do. With some reflections from young people, we also have a data-centered conversation, data-informed policy with our great partners from CLASP. We're going to share some amazing work and some great key points that they have really curated on an initiative called the New Deal for Youth, which aligns with a lot of what the demands that a lot of these youth partners in our networks are looking for. We're also going to wrap it up with solution-oriented discussion, right? So looking at the historical context, looking at some reflections from young people, some art, some amazing spoken word artists. We have 4 of them lined up for you all. It's going to be really great. And then ending this afternoon or this evening, wherever you're calling in from, with some really great ways to get involved, right? So we've heard everything, but how can we actually take some action steps? Some quick housekeeping rules. Let's go to the next slide. Please keep yourself on mute if you can. Use the chat function to ask questions and stay engaged, even if it's reactions or you want to pump someone up, use your reactions. We are recording this session tonight, and we'll be sharing with you afterwards. Please try to use speaker view to see the main people on some of the panels where we have with young people. And as well, someone said, go Matthew. Yes, Matthew is one of our speakers. And also we encourage you to reach out to one another, direct message each other. We'll be dropping a lot of the information from the people that we have lined up today. Please, please, please reach out to them. It's gonna be a great afternoon. So to kick us off, we have graciously we're graced with the presence of Lexi James, who's actually gonna start us off with a virtual blessing. Wish we could be in person, but this is gonna be a virtual blessing. So a quick introduction of Lexi. Lexi James is a youth liaison for the Hopi Opportunity Youth Initiative. She currently serves as a Miss Native American USA 2019 through 2021. So we're dealing with royalty, y'all. Most recently, she became the co-founder of Nurturing Indigenous Intelligence. So take it away, Lexi.
Thank you, Mo. Na Lexi James gang naka na Pitpongsi gang naka na Kulu Toa na Polakaka Idangomo na via Jackie James na Miss Native American USA 2019-2021. Hello everybody. My English name is Lexi. My Hopi name is Pitpongsi, relating to tobacco flowers. I am Corn Clan from the village of Dewa in USA 2019-2021. So Merlin asked for, thank you, Shanice, to do the blessing. So however you pray, I want to be respectful of everyone. If you feel more comfortable turning your camera off or, what have you, please, just do so in your own way. Creator, we ask that you hear the words that are being said today, that you instill the strength and perseverance in each and every one of these warriors. Please watch over your children as we head into another year. Please keep us safe. Please give our people the strength to persevere and to continue. Hold close those sick and struggling. Please bring healing and love to them. All of our prayers to you. Gana'a for another day. Gana'a, Esquale. So again, however you wanted to pray, I just really wanted to be respectful of everyone's beliefs and systems, but just putting forth good intentions. I hope everyone's doing well, and I hope that this evening's event goes smoothly. Thank you, Merlin.
Thank you, Lexi. And she will not be going away anytime soon because she's actually part of our first discussion that we're going to kick off today. So to start off the conversation, we have 5 dynamic young people who will be really setting us up with the context of not only what we saw on January 6th, but really some of these important issues that I mentioned earlier that we have to really not be forgetful of where we have been and how these issues have always been something at the forefront of youth organizing. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to these 5 amazing young people. We have today with us Anushka, co-editor of Gen Zine, and Zine magazines are really awesome, so make sure you check them out. Kim, who is a founder of the National Council of Young Leaders and is also with Opportunity Youth United. We also have Alejandro Ortiz, who is a community organizer with American Friends Service Committee in Iowa. I saw a couple folks here from Iowa, so shout out, Alejandro representing y'all. We have Daniel Rosebud with the Great Project coming from Atlanta. Kim, I believe, is coming from Philly, and Anushka, I believe, are you in California area? Yeah. Did I make that up? Yo, you are, okay, yes. And then Lexi James, which I just introduced with the Hopi, youth liaison with the Hopi Foundation. So I actually want to first touch base with Anushka and Kim. So we have Anushka, who is an amazing organizer, Gen Zer, and we have Kim, who's been a national youth advocate representing us millennials out there. You know, we're still, we're aging a little bit on the youth side, but we're still here, you know. But I think it's great to have a conversation with both of you all to first ask you for your reactions, you know, as a generation of youth here in the United States, what your reflections are on what you saw on January 6th at the state capitol.
I'm happy to go first. I think it was a very painful and surreal day, but also like surrealism is all about perspective. And I remember like sitting down to watch the TV just for a normal day, and all of a sudden, you know, like the insurrection began to unfold. And I was met with a lot of, I don't know if grief is the right word, but shock. And sometimes people will say like, well, why are you so surprised? Like, this is America. Like, of course this is happening. Or when you look at it in comparison to what was happening and like the responses to the Black Lives Matter protests, like, I think it was important for me to like feel that pain and to like sit with it and to want to absorb it happening. As opposed to just being like, okay, well, it's another day in America. Like, it's not. And I think when people trivialize trauma as a nation or like the events that happen in this country, it doesn't help progress. I think sitting with the pain and not forgetting things that happen is crucial to moving forward.
No, thank you. And
thanks, Anushka. Oh, Mother, were you going to say something? Just some of my reflections for January 6th. You know, it is not nothing new. It really reminded me of like the Charlottesville stuff. It was really overwhelming. I think the media dumbed it down more than they needed to. You know, when the Black Lives Matters protest came about, you know, everything went black out. You didn't even hear anything about COVID. So I was expecting like that same thing to happen when people are storming the nation's house. It was very disheartening to see all of that as a young adult, as a young organizer who organized individuals to advocate and walk through those doors. I think the part of me, you know, broken a little bit because I know that we are really hopeful. At the same time, you have some of us who aren't that hopeful, right? And just those days of being able to advocate on Capitol Hill with folks, it gives you a little bit of hope, like we're striving towards some type of change and people are listening, even in a very partisan climate. We try to be as bipartisan as possible. It's really disheartening for the most part. It really hurt me because I have friends and family who are in DC, and you know, just seeing not only my friends and family, but people who we work with too, elected officials, you know, their safety, and just thinking about like, imagine if you worked up there and you thinking it's going to be a normal day at your job, and then like all of this is happening, and people are trying to say what's right, what's wrong. At the end of the day, no one deserves to die. If the political process is being done correct, no one deserves to come in and storm and just try to, you know, mislead people that's not what it was. But it was really disheartening and definitely a smack in a lot of people's face, especially ethnic people, you know, people who come and protest all the time and no one's storming the Capitol, breaking in the stuff and like no form of discipline. at all or respect for others. So it was definitely an overwhelming day, very familiar within the last 4 years. Like that's what the climate has been just in community, right? People have been uncomfortable a lot based off of politics, right? Before it was, everybody was pretty much okay with if you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, it kind of like safety got heightened. People didn't really feel comfortable around people who voted for Trump because it just seemed like it meant way more than just politics, right? Like the values he stood for, like his whole tone, what he's been pushing throughout his administration was really overwhelming, and it shed light to the things that he cares about or the things that he doesn't care about. And I'm just praying everybody is definitely healing or trying to heal from what they've seen, because it was definitely a lot. And I just think that we needed to amplify white supremacy and call it out way better than we did when it was Black Lives Matter. Everyone sent out a message. We did black boxes, but no one's holding anyone accountable for what happened up January 6th. And now with the transition, it's like we're trying to sweep it under the rug and make other things like compete with the issue of what we saw and what was wrong.
Yes, and just building off of what, and Alejandro, Daniel, and Lexi, I will bring you in to respond to what you have heard from Anushka and Kimberly, but I do want to first build off of what Kim said. So, like you said, Kim, we don't want this to be shoved under the rug. And I think that people see the new administration, they see Biden in, and they feel like, okay, Trump is gone, and but I think what we saw on January 6th, it wasn't just even Trump's 4 years. It's been a long thing in our history that has been built up and up and up. And, we saw something in Charlottesville, and I feel like they've shoved it under the rug then. And then it only got worse with the situation that we saw on January 6th, right? So I guess my question to both of you in regards to this is, back in, I think I don't remember the year of the Oklahoma City bombing, but when that occurred, that was domestic terrorism. It was not necessarily called domestic terrorism. Then we had 9/11, something that was a huge marker for a lot of our generation, that even though we were younger, we remember that. It was in 1995, yeah. Thank you for that, Irma. But during 9/11, we remember that, and there was the huge launch on the war on terror, right? And now what we see today, it's almost as if there is a debate on, should we call something terrorism? Do we want to fuel the war on terrorism? So I want to hear your thoughts on exactly that term. I think what we saw on January 6th was terrorism, but I kind of just want to talk a little bit more about, what does justice look like in this situation, right? And just kind of your thoughts on what we have been seeing, because I think this was like the peak of the iceberg, and there's so much other things underneath it that it's such a huge, complex way of a lot of the things that we're experiencing. So what are your thoughts around that conversation regarding terrorism? And also, how do we move forward with healing? Because I don't feel that we're anywhere near closing that gap.
Thoughts that are going through my head contradict each other. The first one is, yes, call it terrorism. Tell it how it is. Make people uncomfortable. Don't beat around the bush. Like, terrorism is about inciting fear within others and trying to make people not feel secure. And so if that's what it is, then that's what it is. But at the same time, terrorism has this connotation in society where we end up becoming fearful of groups of people who we deem as terrorists. And so the way that I'm trying to move forward from the past 4 years is less about hate and more about love and hope. And that's a conversation I've been having with myself, is that I realized, like, Trump was president for my 4 years of college. And so I feel like that is a really pivotal time in a lot of people's lives in general, in being able to like engage with the world. And I'm starting to realize so much of my passion or energy came from a place of hate and fear. And that is not sustainable for an individual, and that is not a sustainable way in stitching back together a society. And so how to actually use hope and love will, I think, be a lesson in itself. And to move forward, I am someone who likes to use words. I don't know. I don't have the answers yet, but I just think whether it's conversation, hopefully patience with other people, but also like really, really making people think. And that goes back to the language of terrorism, and using that to describe it is making people feel uncomfortable with the reality, I think, is my first step.
I feel like what you say is really accurate personally, because in history, did you know that the Black Panther Party was considered a terrorist movement? In fact, there was an assassination conducted by the FBI because Black activists were apparently like riling up so much anti-establishment sentiment back in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement that they just decided that they were going to host essentially what was basically a terrorist attack, so to speak, if you look at it as a way of inciting fear. This was meant to keep the Black communities from rising up against white people. Like they were scared of what Black people could do if they were.
Yeah, so who's joining us actually? So I can actually give you a quick credit for your comments. Who commented it? You can comment on the chat, but thank you for that comment. And that's exactly why I was framing it in that way, right? The discussion around the word use of terrorism, because as Sher mentioned on the comments, wary of terrorism as a label, considering it's been weaponized against the Muslim and Brown communities. And that's something that I was alluding to in regards to the war on terror that was really launched during 9/11. And Anushka, I think you captured that very beautifully. I want to give Kim a couple, 45 seconds to react to what she said and anything that you wanted to build, and then we can bring in the rest of the panel moving forward on some of these issues.
I just wanted to share a quote, because after all that stressful stuff, I had to look back to one of our great scholars, civil rights activists, of course, Martin Luther King, to really like figure this all out. And this is something I highlighted in the Where Do We Go From Here? What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. Justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love. We need to be in community more. Those folks who are organizing white people, we need to, allow space, but also invite them to the table. It's okay to disagree, but we have to understand that we're all in this society. And there needs to be respect and love for all. And we need to understand what people's definition of love, because maybe that's how they're loving on people is, kind of coming off as hate. And, we need to love up on people a little bit more. It sounds cheesy and tacky, but honestly, like, we need to have more check-ins. I know us ethnic people right now, and it's sad that, when it comes to like Black and brown people, indigenous people, that, it's just, that's how it's being. At the end of the day, when it's Black or brown, it's terror. It's some form of terrorism. And at the end of the day, we got to really start to redefine these definitions and these ideas of certain cultures in our spaces.
Yeah, thank you, Kim, for reading that. And you're right on it. And I want to now bring in Alejandro, Daniel, and Lexi first if you want to comment to anything that was first mentioned in the first section of the discussion, but also to really talk about, we're talking about historical context, and we want to let folks know that a lot of these issues that many of you are leaders on in your community have been going on before Trump. They got exacerbated by Trump, even more by the pandemic. But I kind of want you all to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing, on the ground, and its impact on the trajectory of what we just experienced over the last 4 years as well. So feel free, any of you, to pick.
I guess, sorry, I would just jump in there. Um, I think what we all said, a lot of that. I mean, that was all, very great. I agree with so much of that. I think what's like really scary here in terms of like the context here in Iowa is that, I know we're not in DC, but we were in DC. Like Iowa was in DC that day. Like our like people in our neighborhoods, like there was a noticeable footprint of folks from Iowa that were storming the Capitol that day, that were at our Capitol because they couldn't make it to that Capitol. We had police officers in the Capitol taking selfies with some of these, I guess, right wing folks there that were, again, trying to make a statement even here in our state. And these are things that have been, as you mentioned, kind of developing for quite some time. There's been this, this growing movement from, some of these folks that were, our anti-immigrant folks that have such a stronghold in our state politics. Even like they are organized to push legislation in our state legislature, that are organized to hold these types of rallies and so on. And that's something that essentially we, while we've been to some extent, as we've discussed, surprised, but also not surprised. It's just been, like, as you were saying, the leadership that hasn't responded in a way that truly acknowledges what's been going on and what's going on and where we are right now. And what one of the biggest fears I have now is that the response is going to be escalated in a completely the wrong way, where instead, what we might see from Congress or just leaders in general is, I guess, adding more money to DHS and to, militarizing our police and occupying our neighborhoods as opposed to, or, as a response, and then, more marginally affecting, again, the same communities that are already marginalized, and they're already being silenced, they're already being targeted. When we think about, school shootings and such, and the response to that, we know that it wasn't the white schools that, ended up being, essentially, locked down with, police officers in the schools and so on in response to what was going on with that issue. And I see that happening again, with where the funding is going to go, what agencies are going to get, more power, more militarized force. And I just, that's one of the fears that I have in how, our leadership is going to respond to this type of activity.
Yeah, thank you, Alejandro. Daniel and Lexi, do we have 2 minutes each to give us some of your reflections and some of your local groundwork that you have seen?
Yeah, I think just to kind of tap in on what you all were saying about the six, I think a number of things kind of unfolded there, and even just thinking about the usage of wording too. We talked about the connotation of wraparound terrorism, whether it's domestic or foreign, it's terrorism, and so we really have to play the game of the individuals who have run this country for the longest, which are conservatives. These people, deem themselves to be contextualists. They deem themselves to be, patriotic as well for some reason. But in them calling out them being conservative and being contextualists, or people that believe words mean words, then you have to hold them to the oaths that they take. And in the oath that they take, they take an oath to defend our country against foreign and domestic violence, and so, or domestic terrorism rather. But some of the work, here in Georgia that we had been working on, we had a bad experience in our gubernatorial race for Stacey Abrams, and it was really an ode to her in the way that we were liberated to come together. We were met here. We're in the South, where people assume that Georgia is a black state, but we're really in the city of Atlanta, and proper Atlanta. It also has its places that aren't necessarily black or of color, and so we're really a brown place in the South in the sea of a red city or a red state. And so once we experienced what we did with the gubernatorial race, there was a number of strategies that were set in place by Stacey Abrams and three organizations that she coined, two of which were New Georgia Project and Fair Fight. And so with their help, I was able to also mobilize 18 to 29-year-olds, pairing them with some of the resources that those organizations put out, like drop boxes. They were, in prior years, we never had a full or comprehensive database of drop boxes. We really brought this race home with absentee voting to the point that they're now trying to regulate how much we can vote from home. So in the presidential race, we really came out with early voting and absentee voting, and a lot of the tools that they set in place supported that. But then when we came around to the Senate race, people that had not voted in the presidential race voted this time around, and they voted early. And so we had maybe, in the presidential race, we may have maybe 600 and something thousand, or maybe just at 1 million people voting at home. But in the Senate race, we had maybe 2 million people vote early in the race. So the energy really carried over from the presidential race. The significance of what was going on was national, even though it was a local race. And so the work for us was really highlighting where to go, when to go, giving proper information about candidates so that individuals were able to make choices. Because the want and the desire for a route was already there. I was able to speak with Areva Martin, and even then I mentioned that this wasn't a choice for us. I don't think for any young person in America, but this, in the presidential race, it wasn't a choice for us between two of lesser evils. It was literally that we wanted a route, and the Biden and Harris administration represented that route. I am a little bit young to really know much of the history of Biden as a politician or Kamala as a politician, and I'll do my research. But I do know that they represent a route. And so I feel elated that we were able to win the presidency, and I'm absolutely elated that we were able to flip the Senate.
Yes, and for those of you who might not know on this call, Daniel Rosebud, along with Shanice Turner, I hope she's on this call, and OYU and Georgia Youth Poll Workers, they did a phenomenal job. And Time came out with an article on how youth really organize and turn Georgia blue. So y'all have to check that out. There's a lot of mad respect for the groundwork that was laid out, like you said, Daniel, and the coalition building that was done in the midst of all this pandemic and trying to energize young people to get out and vote, right? So I do want to give Lexi time here to comment briefly on the amazing work of organizing on a reservation and how different that looks to secure and make sure that the Native youth have access to health, mental health, and a lot of the great work that she's also done in the Hopi Reservation.
Everyone's comments are really, I guess, interesting and eye-opening. Like Marlon mentioned, I do live on the reservation. I grew up here and have lived here most of my life. And just some terminology, everyone, I would hope everyone knows what a reservation is, but my reservation is fairly secluded. The nearest Walmart grocery store, like big grocery store, is about an hour away. The nearest town with about like a mall, a Target, Sam's Club, is about 2 hours away. And so understanding that when the pandemic hit, our people weren't really sure what to do. A lot of reservations enforced curfews, a lot of reservations enforced no off reservation traveling. Because we didn't know what to do, we kicked into high gear getting food and supplies to our people, making sure that they were taken care of in that sense. But also realizing that doing those distributions, whether it's bi-monthly, whether it's every other week, however many times it took to get these supplies and resources out, was a form of, I guess, mental health work. With the current administration being my color or any person of color going into a border town, referring to a town that borders a reservation, are usually heavily very racist and will most times, if not all the time, refuse services to people who look like me. And in doing that, a lot of our people couldn't get into the towns or didn't want to go to town anymore to get the groceries or get the basic supplies that we needed, because a lot of the times we were harassed, we were turned away from services, or we just straight up felt unsafe. You know, we didn't want to go in, or it was much more, I think, addressing the fact that it was much more than just a presidency. It was a movement in the wrong direction. It gave the opportunity, opened the door for people to express freely that I feel that I'm better than you and you're less than me, and I could care less what happens to you because of the color of your skin. And in realizing that, we noticed that the levels of stress were rising. We were getting a lot of calls into support groups. Because of the pandemic, we all had to go virtual or over the phone. We had to see spots with our local mental health folks over the phone, and they couldn't make their in-person visits per usual. And so we really had to navigate, how do we navigate this now new norm of not being able to see one another, of not being able to offer support like we normally do. If someone called me up and said, hey, I need this, or, you know, I'm not feeling too great, okay, you know, come over, let's have some tea, let's get our minds right, you know, let's talk about what's going on. And we can no longer do that. And so it really, I guess, threw a lot of our Indigenous communities into a frenzy. You know, how do we navigate this? So realizing that, okay, the easiest way to get our people safe is to get supplies here and then distribute them ourselves. And even asking while they're in the distribution line, okay, how many households, how many kids, you know, how many adults, things like that. And then asking, you know, how are you doing today? Are you okay? You know, is there anything else? And then having to slip in because mental health is such a taboo subject. I'm trained in this. I'm trained in safe talk. You know, I'm trained in assist. You know, I'm able to talk to you without, you know, fear of being talked about. You know, so just let me know if you're okay. And having to slide that in, because it was so foreign to a lot of people to be like, I don't want to reach out. We saw a rise in people creating opportunities for people to get on virtually and talk to one another, and wanting to say, I'm going to host a Zoom tonight. Get on, let's just talk about what's going on and let's make sure everyone feels okay. So the work is definitely different than working in the city. And we're so secluded, having to just, in the city, you're working with people of many different backgrounds and many different situations. And a lot of times out here, we're all facing the same thing, but it's times a couple of thousand. And how do we navigate that? So.
Yeah, and honestly, the best way to wrap up, you know, with the discussion that we just had, and thank you everyone for engaging in the chat, is really what Alejandro, Kim, Anushka, Daniel, and Lexi are talking about. What brings all of this together is really mutual aid. That on the ground, as community organizers, as leaders in their community, there was no response, and we knew no one was going to come and save us. So we organized, and through mutual aid, which is something that is really top of mind right now, that obviously because of the pandemic, a lot of people had to resort to help each other out as a community. Now, that is not a sustainable form moving forward, but it is beautiful to see that even in the midst of all this bipartisanship, you know, constant extremism on all sides, people are still willing in their communities to say, how can we pitch in? How can we organize? How can we do some of this mutual aid so that our brother and sister is not completely off, you know, falling off? And, you know, we are going to have a solutions-oriented conversation that has, you know, more than just something like mutual aid, more concrete action steps that we can take. But thank you all so much for that conversation. I want to, it's a little heavy. These are very hard, very direct subjects and issues. So we want to allow some creative expression from young people to summarize it through the spoken word. And, you know, I want to hand it over to Kim to introduce us to our first spoken word poet.
Hey everybody, so we want to welcome our first artist, just like Marlene shared, just how important and heavy the topic is, and never excluding the arts and how the arts have been driving movements for so long, making music for freedom for so long. I wanted to invite my friend, my dope friend who happens to do music and art, Israel, normally with the $. I don't know if he's in the building yet, but hopefully he is. He's from Denver, Colorado. Do we have you, Israel?
Yep, I'm in the house.
All right, my boy's in the house. Israel with a $, always holding it down, doing beautiful things for his community, always representing his people. Passing on the mic.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Yeah, as I'm sitting back listening to the conversation, I'm not going to talk very much. I'm just going to let the music speak, and hope you guys enjoy. Yeah. I look at the news, it's driving me crazy. I'm searching for change, I'm searching for love. I'm looking for knowledge, the earth and above. I need a future where college is free. I need a future where none of the peace. I need to pain. First few years, I've been hurting and praying for change. My mama worked 2 jobs, my daddy worked 3. He came to this country, American dream. Overcame struggles to get what I need. La música canta, la sola zapata. A new revolution, because beauty is brown and beauty is black. They want to kill us and label us trash in places and ghettos with drug and depression. But why do it hate me so much? Is it because money or because of my skin? You're scared I get rich, locked up by people that looking like me. But people like you get a slap on the wrist. The rules you create, how system you build, how stand up for change, to help out my neighbor and wake up with love. For the next 4 years, I want to see change. If college ain't free and climates don't change, I'm talking to Biden. I'm gripping my Bernie. The new generation will bring visionaries, create a solution. Because at this moment, I speak for my people. My sister in 7 and knows any change. She's using her voice to stand like a leader. Every day I learn we need more women like AOC to show our ladies to use their voice and not be afraid. The evil's to be. We gotta be priests in a cold world over the screens on this panel because COVID ain't over. And please wash your hands and stay with the mask. The planet is sick. We need some healing. Let's pray for each other and wake up and change. Obama in office, it gave me a taste. Even with Trump, I never lost faith because young people planning could uplift the planet. The beauty in life. I look at the news. I rewrite the story with poetic success. I'm searching for change. I'm searching for love. The future will need. We're blessed with my words. We'll sit down and listen. Could carry the love. The future will need. We're changing it up. The future we need. Let's build it with truth. Let's build it with love and stand up together. Let's weather the storm. The future we need. Can stand up together with new visionaries. Let's rewrite the future and just sing along. The future we need. Let's build up the truth. Let's build it with love. Let's stand up together. Let's weather the storm. The future we need. Let's stand up together with new visionaries. I need to see change or something else different. I'm tired of hurt and I'm tired of pain. Invest on my futures are watching this change. Give me the line, just level the game. Only shit good with bullets of hope. I'm walking in office and loading my Timbs and Bernie. I walk in the office, I want to see change. I want to build hope. The future I see could uplift the world with new visionaries around the right news. I want to see love. I want to see peace. The future I need. The new generation, the willing to dream, the willing to change. The future in need. American dream. A poet he spoke with beauty, a hope. A young visionaries could uplift the world. The kings and the queens, together is power. Let's show them our beauty and protest in silence. The future I need. The future I see can stand up the leaders. The future I need. The beauty in music. The beauty in need is filling with love. A young visionaries, let's build up tomorrow and dream real.
Thank you. Oh my God. Y'all don't even know. He wrote this in less than 2 days. For the future we need. This is a great talent. Israel, I'm gonna let you introduce your next colleague and spoken word artist.
Okay, thank you. Next up, I want to introduce Jocelyn G from Oakland, and thank you guys for the conversation, y'all.
Hello, you guys. My name is Jocelyn, as my peer just introduced. So I wrote this also too in a day. Okay, let's get it. I ask you one thing. What do you stand for? I tell you many. I stand for love, the purest and highest vibration one can feel. I stand for collective liberation, the liberation the Constitution promised us and leaves stranded every time we demand for today's justice. And we is us. We is the essential workers in the front lines. We is undocumented immigrants working tirelessly with no immunity. We is the Black Lives Matter movement. We is the million individuals incarcerated doing free labor. We is the dreamers. We is the future generations that sell us hope. We is us who stands by faith today and dismantles fear right now. I stand with farm workers whose hands touch rainy grass and smoky winds and pick your fruit to prepare your fresh lettuce today. I stand with undocumented individuals that work tirelessly on a stolen land where my ancestors planted seeds to flourish but aimed to be buried by their man-made activity. They tried, as Dano said, quisieron enterrarnos, pero se les olvidó que somos semillas. They tried and continue to bury our voice, but don't know we're magical seeds. I stand with the Black Lives Matter movement, the movement that walked the streets filled in rage from Oakland to the Pacific Sea, the emotion begging for human decency, only demanding for humane justice. So I ask you, do you cherish us? Are you proud of Americans' history? Do you see mostly bliss or mystery? What do you stand for? I stand with one nation that seems to be at crossroads, but in the end of the tunnel, light consumes the soul of the fearless for a better day. Because today is tomorrow for the brave. How brave are you to create today's nation, the fundamental of life, liberation, and pursuit of happiness? With the glory guidance, the clouded and coated atmosphere, I can see beyond the stratosphere. The rivers are our veins, so the efforts we are making shall never go in vain. Stand with me. I am in the new that you see. Stand with me. Amplify my voice. Stand with me. I can see a greener economy through the eyes of the adolescents. By giving us the mind for the world to see, raising our vibrations, nations to nations. Don't resist my demands. Assist me with a mountain of hope. Mountains of hope my parents crossed from Mexico to Oakland for me to stand a foot in this nation. So stand with me. Me is we. We have the courage to speak and faith to lead. Let's be the change we want to see. Thank you. And so now I will definitely pass it on to Matthew Marroquin. Thank you, guys.
Marroquin.
Yes, thank you, Jocelyn. Take it away, Matthew.
Hello. Mine's not that peppy. Let's go into it, though. America, America, God shed his grace on thee. Oh, did something happen? Oh. Hold up. Okay, there you go. Let's start that over, guys. America, America, God shed his grace on thee. Fingers linked between mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters, familias surviving the war against life. How's your day going? The white woman asks me every day when I walk into that coffee shop. I say it's going good. I say I'm surviving every day, but am I truly surviving? I'm not trying to survive like how my people are trying to survive. I'm not crossing the Rio Grande or transforming myself into a worm and digging holes into the earth to make sure it can breathe, for immigrants are the ones who make the earth breathe. Rising after, tired, laid on sidewalks like it just rained on a cool spring day, hand in hand with your children. Parents, grandparents, others who you do not know who simply wish to survive just like you. They ran, they drove, they flew, they swam, they dug, they crawled and made damn sure to stay alive just to get a taste of the other side. But then you're found and you're forced to trade your linked fingers for linked chains, your mother's warmth for foil blankets, your father's strength to take care of another child who is not yours, who simply came to this country just like you. Your brother or sister taken to a different cage, camp, city. Mamá y papá se dijo, solo vamos a vivir esto si hacemos estos juntos. We will only survive this if we do this together. But you're alone now. crying child in arms, wanting milk from your prepubescent breasts. Guards walking by, talking the language the free speak. Chain link vision, cracked mud hugging your thighs, face dry and skinny. Foil wrapped around the child, for they only gave you one. This is America. This is why you ran, why you swam, why you dug, why you left home. This is America, land of the free, land of opportunity and apparent greater community. This is America where surviving was supposed to mean thriving. The place where your Theo sent money from green that turned into the hell of a coyote that led you to the serpent's tunnel. This is America, the place where the cartel wasn't supposed to sell you like a prostitute, where the Mata powers wanes, where the drug kings built to reign, the place that you do not know, the place that is not your home, and to make damn sure that you know that too. This is America. This is America. From sea to the shining sea. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Let's move over to Natalia Peña.
Well, thank you, Matthew. I've done this poem a couple times, but it's seen a revamp for you guys, so enjoy. The bullet shot turned to dust, and they, like dust, have left our minds with the hands of our oppressors holding fast to triggers. 10 more moments of silence, a solemn whisper. When a flag half-mast means more than a casket, or flowers graveside in a basket mean more than the life now lacking, a future taken, students ripped from the earth, children taken by wildfire. You and I have class together, had class together. First was English, then homeroom. There Miss A reminded us our voices, our weapons, deadly but ours, and soon we hear thunder and lightning, a cacophony of bullets coughing. The sounds are loud, and then it's over. No time for thinking, only thinking, praying it wasn't your child, your brother, sister, friend. This is not normal. I watch them as they run. I'm frozen, melting away as they run. They fall like shooting stars. Just as surprising, but more often my wishes will not work on them. Their dreams, like rocks, will fall back to the earth, and they 6 feet under as if they never existed at all. It's almost like they never existed at all. What little of their memory remains tarnished by tomorrow's paper, the victims nameless and heroes quiet, while the evil takes center stage. Backpacks, projects, pens and pencils, homework litters the floor, covering their remains. It isn't safe here. The bullet shot turned to dust, and they, like dust, have left our minds with the hands of our oppressors holding fast to triggers. And my tears, another river where your tears have wept, where you have slept. At last, sending to you some peace, a world away, a world not far from here, just above. Watch over me as I walk down this empty hallway, searching for your face in the lunchroom, bus stop, desk, another drill, more dust, an unrelenting crowd in your wake. Sweet dreams. I just wish you'd open your eyes and smile for me one last time. And so I pass by your empty locker, hoping to see your face. It's got roses and candles lit for you, but even flames flicker, and like you, my friend, extinguish. Thank you.
Amazing. Can we just all give another reactions, comments to all of these 4 spoken poets, because that is mad talent, and wow, just breathless, and what a perfect way to uplift us, center us after the first discussion. And let's go into the following segue, which is actually going to be more data focused, informed policy from our amazing partners at CLAS. So I would love to introduce Dr. Nia Westbay and Bruce Wilson, who's a member of the New Deal for Youth cohort. Take it away, y'all.
Thanks, Marlene, but also no thanks. Why you made us go after the poets, Marlene? You're wrong for that. Hi, everybody. I am Nia Westbay, and I'm here with my friend Bruce. You know, it's not totally fair for me to criticize Marlene for putting us after the poets, because in real talk, we're going to say in numbers a little bit what the artists just said in art. So I'm going to talk you through some work that we did in preparation for an initiative that we have gotten underway in the last few months. And we had, long before COVID hit, you know, we had already thought we were going to take a look at some data to try and understand what were some of the impacts of the Trump administration on young people. But then, you know, the pandemic hit, and the short and the long of the story I'm about to tell you all is things were terrible before, and yet somehow the pandemic managed to make things worse. But then I'm going to pass it over to Bruce to sort of talk to you all a little bit about the initiative we're working on and how we're starting to think about trying to make some of these things better in policy. So I do have a little bit of poetry in my numbers because it's helpful to start there. So we did an event similar to this one back in May that Marlene also helped to organize with a bunch of young leaders from around the country. And we had a poet there who shared this bit that was tied into our work focused on economic justice. We live in a country that is more concerned about making up for lost profits instead of the rising death toll. Massive unemployment rates and the ones that had hardships before the pandemic occurred, but continue. So we started there because we felt like this, his poem really spoke to what we saw in the numbers, which is that even before the pandemic, young people were facing unemployment rates double the national average, sometimes more than double, depending on the group. And then the pandemic hit and young people have experienced absolutely brutal unemployment rates. These numbers are from the summer. They may be even worse now, but upwards of 50% for some groups of young people who are unemployed. Similarly, for poverty before the pandemic, we already had, again, across the board, young people experiencing poverty rates at much higher rates than other groups of people in this country. A lot of people don't know that young adults are actually one of the groups with the highest poverty rates in the country. And, you know, it starts at 1 in 9 for white young adults and just gets higher and higher, up to 1 in 5 for Native and Black young adults, as well as Asian American young adults. And with all that unemployment and with all that poverty, you know, Congress early in the spring passed their first pandemic relief package, and more than 90% of young people were not able to access any of that help. So we got all this unemployment, we've got all this poverty, and nobody's able to access the benefits that are supposed to help with that situation, right? And it's not because Congress intentionally was trying to keep these benefits from helping young people, but they weren't set up and they weren't designed in ways that made it easy for young people to access. The next section where we looked at some data is in the area we call healing and well-being. And this one we leave with a quote from one of our young organizer partners who said, "The need for us to talk about healing no longer is something that we need to do at some point, but is an active part of our organizing." And I think that's some of what we have been talking about in this space already tonight. You know, I've said to my colleagues, I think we are damaged from the last 4 years in ways that it's going to take us months and years to realize we all have a lot of healing to do. And again, that's showing up in data, right? Even before the pandemic, there were growing rates of young people who said they needed some sort of mental health support, but were not able to get it. So in 2016, that number was 750,000 for young people living in poverty. By 2018, it had grown to 1.1 million. And then in the context of the pandemic, which is a trauma that all of us are experiencing, those numbers are now up to 2 in 3 young people who are saying that they're feeling depressed, down, or hopeless. And those numbers are yet even higher and more alarming for especially Asian American young people. And we also took a look at health insurance. Again, even before the pandemic, young adults have very high rates of being uninsured. Again, ranging from 1 in 10 for white young people, all the way to 1 in 3 for Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander young people. So that's a lot of uninsured young people that we had before the pandemic. But then the pandemic hits, people are losing their jobs. They're also losing their health insurance. So in 2018, young people had a 14.3% rate of being uninsured. By July this year, that was up to almost 23%. And then the last bucket that I'm going to touch on is what we call safe communities, where again, I have a quote from that same poem that same young man wrote, where he wrote, "But how can we believe anything America says on how to stay safe when we still have Black and brown men getting gunned down?" And here we looked at a couple of things. This is all data from before the pandemic. But we know, I'm sure I'm talking to the choir here in terms of the school to prison pipeline and how a lot of the problems that young people face in terms of encountering the justice system start in school. Black children are 15% of all kids in US public schools, but they're 35% of kids that get arrested at schools. Those numbers are also high for Native young people, for Pacific Islander young people. For Black young men and Black women, they are disproportionately being stopped by the police in their communities and disproportionately arrested when they've been stopped. And then the source of all the protests that we saw, earlier in the summer, Black young men are much more likely to die at the hands of law enforcement than any other group. And those numbers have also been increasing for Hispanic young men. And this last piece that I want to share is really about sort of misplaced priorities, where we see that in the 70s, the investments in workforce development were 24 billion. They dropped down to 5 billion by 2017. But at the same time, we're dramatically increasing our spending on corrections and on policing. And a lot of times, folks will say in policy spaces that budgets are demonstrative of our values. And if we look at these numbers, it's very clear that we're putting value on corrections and policing over investments in the types of things that are going to help young people to thrive.
Clean, everything in there is clean.
Somebody just came off mute. This is all defining why we can't wait, why we really need some change in this moment. Is long overdue, like the moment is now. And so CLASP is partnering with a group of young change makers from all around the country to try and start to tackle some of these issues and more. So I'm going to turn it over to Bruce to share a little bit with you all about that.
Thank you for that presentation. And I'm reading the comments, and yes, those numbers hurt. Every time I read this presentation, look at these numbers, I become more and more infuriated. But in light of the first panel we had, I am actively trying to move with love and peace, but those numbers do hurt. And what we do for a New Deal for Youth, as we know what the New Deal was brought by the President Roosevelt in the 30s, it lifted up the economy. It lifted up the social status. There was a lot of upward mobility for people, but a lot of people were left behind. People of color, women, young people, indigenous people. There was an entire community of people that were left behind. And so what we're trying to do with this New Deal for Youth is trying to get that same socioeconomic justice, that same mental health and well-being, economic justice, education. We want that to lift up the people who have been forgotten all this time. It may have not been intentional when they were creating these policies for us to be left behind, but whether they were or not, we have been suffering for decades and decades now. And so what we do, we are a group of young people coming together, a cohort of youth leaders, and we're co-creating, being innovative with our ideas and bold ideas, people who have been doing the work, community organizers, academics, intellects. And it's a continuum of conversations that we're having to really trying to affect policy. And it's to help influence the nation's policy, practice, and public discourse. And as I'm hearing this and I'm speaking about it, it's very apparent that there is a fierce urgency of now. We cannot wait for these things, as we see the hashtag, why we can't wait. We can't wait any longer because, people are going to continually be affected by these things. And so we hope with this new Biden administration that what we can put together with this New Deal for Youth is something that can change the direction or the course of what has been the paradigm of this country, something that can really uplift the people. When I constantly look at these numbers, and I was reviewing this PowerPoint last night, and it's so revealing because every slide, it's like I have a personal antidote to everything that's going on. Those numbers are me, and I have those numbers like in my friends in my community. And so the urgency that we have to have, it has to be grave and apparent, and we have to exaggerately, push these things forward. And so we encourage everyone, the conversation that we have with the New Deal for Youth, they are inspiring. I often get new ideas all the time. I'll go back and do more research from the conversations that we have with other people in the cohort. But the goal is to really change policy, implement new policy that can help all of us lift up the quote unquote least of those who haven't been thought of for generations. And so we encourage everyone to have that fierce urgency of now, understand we cannot wait for these things to happen because we've already waited too long. 4 years have gone past. And so these next 4, we have to craft and chisel in every way that we can to make sure that people are going to benefit from the government as they should. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. And the last thing I'm going to say is that we will have a video coming out next week, I believe, that amplifies some of this data. There will be opportunities to share. We really want to get the word out and make sure people understand how serious and how urgent this is. So we'll definitely make sure that Marlene gets info out to you all about how you can help spread the word. Thanks, Marlene.
No, thank y'all. Thank you so much for the hard numbers. We had some of the reflections, the firsthand testimonies of a lot of these issues, and you all put it so beautifully together in the urgency around numbers, because I know sometimes people need to look at the numbers because it gives them more of the alarming, wanting the need to respond as well, if they're not close to proximity to some of the things that some of the young people have reflected on. So yeah, this is super exciting. It's always so beautiful to see policymakers working with young people in tangent to do some of this work. So huge shout out to CLASP and a lot of the partners that are also joining us on here who have worked. We all kind of work together. So let's support each other in the work that we're doing, and it aligns with the future that we need here. So this is perfect because the next discussion that we're going to talk into is the last 4 years and the 4 years that we need, right? So we looked at the data. Now we want to have conversations about what we should be getting in these next 4 years that we need. And to do that, I'm going to hand it over to Dylan, who will be introducing that panel.
Thanks, Marlene. So we have a conversation now with, joining us now is Cody from the advocacy organization Student Debt Crisis, Anima, a student voice ambassador and one of the leaders of the CUZ Youth BLM organization, and Anushka, who co-founded GenZine, a Gen Z-led magazine. Anushka, I will pass it to you.
Thank you. I'm really excited to chat with Cody and Amina today. I just want to start off by talking about what you guys have done in your respective fields. So in your field of youth advocacy and organizing, what has the last 4 years of youth power looked like? And what advances have been made to pave a path forward on climate, on racial justice, on gun violence prevention, and student debt, and specifically through your main area of work as well? Cody, would you like to go first?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about it. First off, my name is Cody Hunanian. I am the program director at an advocacy group called Student Debt Crisis. We are proud to say we are the nation's largest grassroots organization that mobilizes around the issue of student debt. And we have about 2 million supporters. So you can imagine that represents people from all ages, backgrounds, locations, races. It's a very diverse group. What I think has been really interesting over the last 4 years that's particularly relevant for this conversation is the huge increase in mobilization of young people around the issue of student debt. So you would actually be surprised to find out that a large portion of our list are older folks, middle-aged Americans, and often retirees. And the reason that is because student debt, while young people and students have tons of student debt, they haven't started paying it back, and they haven't been impacted economically by the burden that it is. But what's happened over the last 4 years has been this unbelievable awakening of young people who realize that while they may not be paying back their student debt, or maybe they just started paying it back, it's already starting to rob them of their futures. And so now we see that because of this awakening, young people are becoming probably the loudest voice in this movement. And what I think is particularly interesting is that not only the loudest voice, but they're not afraid to demand really big and bold solutions. And if you're us, your student debt crisis, we feel that this is a crisis and this deserves really strong, thoughtful solutions. And so young people are going big. They're talking about canceling student debt. They want to end this crisis once and for all. That's been the new shift. Young people getting involved and bringing their really innovative, big thinking solutions to the crisis. And I really respect them for it.
Awesome, thank you.
Of course.
Do you want to chip in?
Yeah, so on another note, so I'm from Syracuse, New York, and kind of on behalf of Q's Youth BLM, which was a completely youth-funded organization about Black Lives Matter. It was founded over the summer in response to the George Floyd killing and just everything that was going on pertaining to Black Lives Matter. So this completely youth-funded organization really wanted to focus efforts on a high school level and the community that the people who started it are affected by. So we've been working on things to defund in-school police and refund our schools and communities, doing things such as campaigns to remove SROs from the high schools in my school district. And those efforts involve a lot of advocacy. And I think a really important part of that was us being able to really educate the students in our district, the students in our communities, and just telling them and letting them know how much power that they do have. Because I know oftentimes in school districts, students don't really realize how much power they hold as students. So really been able to educate students on, school, not necessarily school rules, but just having them understand that their voice really does matter. And kind of in similarity with that, so I'm also student voice ambassador on a more local level. I'm currently working on a project to help decolonize my school curriculum in hopes of curriculum to be a lot more inclusive, a lot more diverse, and being able to represent the students that are learning that information.
That's amazing stuff. I am involved in media and storytelling, and specifically youth storytelling. And I think for me, my journey also began with Genzine in terms of advocacy and organizing. And perhaps some of the issues that we're tackling, especially you guys are tackling today, would have been reserved for, you guys are activists, but for people who know from the day they're born out of the womb that they want to impact social change. But especially during Trump's presidency and all of the issues that we're faced with today, I've taken on the perspective that every single person, no matter if you consider yourself an activist or an organizer or want to get into politics, you are responsible for the fate of humanity as well and the collective good. And so I've seen a heartwarming amount of people who just wouldn't consider themselves writers, even speaking up on issues that impact their communities, impact their personal lives, and impact the world at large. And so I've been humbled by the amount of youth power that I've been able to see and experience. And I hope that that type of energy continues on with us as we graduate and make our way into the real world.
Yeah, Anushka, I'm glad you mentioned the power of storytelling. I think, obviously it's unbelievably powerful when folks like you all take storytelling and develop it into organizations, products, services, but people's everyday lives are stories. Something that's been going on at Student Debt Crisis that I think is one of the strongest things we do is we've been collecting borrower student debt stories from day one. And so when we have stories of everyday people and we can deliver those to legislators, to other advocates, to partners, it helps strengthen our movement. So, bravo to you for having Genzine and, storytelling in that format. But at people listening that are just everyday Americans, their story, their experience is also really powerful.
It's definitely what brings everything we do to life.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the Trump era. And we started talking about this with the insurrection on January 6th at the very beginning of today's panel. How it seems like every day there was something else that we had to adapt to and to evolve against. So with the consequences of the Trump era, how have the last 4 years pushed you to innovate and hold the lines of defense in your work and keep the momentum going when it seems like everything is against it?
Yeah, I think a big thing with that was just definitely community support. I know here in Syracuse, luckily there are a lot of different organizations and youth-led initiatives that really allow student activists, youth activists, older folks to really join together towards movements, whether it's tackling things such as like environmental justice, hosting like local protests, gun violence, and then of course more recently Black Lives Matter related topics. So I definitely think the last 4 years have kind of really caused youth to, I guess, force themselves to be more aware and politically aware of things that are going on. I know like during the Obama administration, it was just kind of like, oh, like nice, awesome, you know, America, cool. But I definitely think these past 4 years have really pushed us to, you know, educate ourselves more, learn about what's going on, and just kind of, I guess, force us to fight for things we care about more. Because we really just showed us how a lot of our like basic rights, a lot of our, you know, things that would be normally given to us were kind of stripped away. And I definitely think it also kind of forced a lot of us to have like a bit of a barrier, because honestly, personally for me, these past 2 years have just shown how, I guess, bad racial justice is in this country. So I definitely think, although there are a lot of negative things, it also has really pushed people, like I know myself as a youth, to be more active, to be more engaged socially in things that are going on.
I really like that you mentioned community first. Just to touch on this, at least for me, I hope not everyone feels this way, because it's tiring. I'm sure you do though. Just I constantly feel like inundated with information and with like despair. And that's kind of what I talked about at the beginning, that it came from a place of fear and anxiety and anger rather than from like love and hope. But I think community is something that we also really have to hold on to at the end of the day. And that is where change happens. And it goes back to like the meaning of grassroots. And I think especially in a digital age, we feel the pressure to reach a very large audience, to reach every single person who suffers from these problems, and to bridge our broken nation like immediately. And that is something that I'm always trying to remind myself that that is not necessarily the goal. And the goal is to connect with people in the community and with like-minded individuals, or to help one and then the next. And I think that is how you build power. And that is something that I've relied on. Cody?
I have to agree. I think, you know, starting locally and in your community is one way to do it. I think something else that's really stood out in our issue on tackling student loan debt is the power of like coalition building, right? And so that happens in your community. It also happens, as you mentioned, with like-minded folks. So, you know, student debt, and particularly the movement to cancel student loan debt, in just the last few months has really hit a level of momentum we had never seen before. And it's directly connected to this idea of coalition building. So we were really proud. We signed on to a coalition letter, included over 325 like-minded organizations. And that included, you know, some of the biggest names that work on policy, including the NAACP, but it also included a ton of new youth-centered voices like Student Voice, Young Invincibles, who I've worked with for years, and some interesting ones like the National Young Farmers Coalition, right? So we're identifying new ways to connect the threads of what we're working on and how other organizations are connected to these topics, how their stakeholders, how their communities can play a part and also can benefit from some really serious student debt reform.
Absolutely. So moving forward, how do we define justice for the next 4 years of the Biden administration? I don't think now is a time to relax at all. And it feels like the doors are open for maybe our voices to actually be heard. So what does justice look like for both of you guys' fields?
Yeah, well, I feel like, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Okay. I was going to say, like, I feel like, especially when it comes to racial justice, I definitely think, for one, justice is defined as being able to initially, I guess, accept and understand the idea of institutionalized systems that have caused racism and oppression. Because I know the past administration, Trump wasn't even able to admit that, you know, the United States is built upon a lot of systematic racism and things of that nature. So I definitely think that first, at least being able to acknowledge that and move forward from there is the first step, which luckily the current administration has, you know, like proved that. But I definitely think it definitely could be defined and start from being able to have a more diverse, I guess, people who are involved in justice, if that makes sense. Like, it's hard to bring justice or say a system is just when it's built upon oppression and things like that. So I definitely think, you know, diversifying those bodies, diversifying those people in charge will definitely be the first step.
Yeah, I agree completely with Amina. You know, at Student Debt Crisis, we feel that, you know, our goal as an organization is to achieve the different ways that we can shape economic justice, right? And so if you agree that certain systems are broken, oppressive, are failing everyday Americans, then the way that we achieve economic justice is by repairing the harm that that's caused. So, you know, for student loan debt, we look at student debt cancellation as a serious way to make up for the irreparable harm that's been caused by our broken system. And again, to return the promise of a better future for those who access education. But also to Amina's point, anything related to economic justice right now specifically needs to include a really strong lens related to racial justice as well. You know, this past summer with the murder of George Floyd, that didn't just change the national discussion. I think it's been an unbelievable catalyst for reshaping how policy is developed. You know, at Student Debt Crisis now, whenever we talk about policies, we are talking about how Black and brown borrowers are disproportionately impacted by the cost of college and by student debt. You know, we look at debt cancellation and free college as an opportunity to tear down barriers to access for higher education. And, you know, Mina also talked about this in her community building, but we also need to mobilize what we call these trusted messengers. There are local and like-minded organizations in every community that can help educate people of their options and their rights. And we really need to empower those people in these communities to make sure that people really have access to all the information they need. It can't just come from, you know, white collar folks working at the federal government. We need people on the ground who can really do some of the heavy lifting.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, I feel like I've also taken on a slightly different approach, whereas yes, I care about these issues so much, but I suppose what I am tackling is like democracy and a civic engagement across the board. And so I also have a duty to continue to build community and a community of curiosity, compassion, and critical thinking to avoid complacency at all costs, because while now for so many activists, this is a time to shine and have your voices heard, I refuse to let the rest of society go to sleep again for the next 4 years. That's my contribution.
Yeah, Anushka, you know, related to the student debt topic, I think, you know, we look at higher education, as you mentioned, as one of the major ways that we can make sure that we have a well-informed citizenry. I think with a well-informed citizenry, we not only have people who can participate more fully in our civic life, but obviously they're less likely to be susceptible to some of the messages of hate and violence that are out there. So we look at student debt and making college affordable and accessible related to, you know, domestic safety and you know, reduction of violence and hatred and all of that. There's a lot of intersection there.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone so much for that amazing discussion. Shout out to Anushka for facilitating that great conversation and all the great things that came out of that. And this is all flowing very well, but I'm also not gonna lie that we are running behind on time. So please bear with us and hopefully you can stay an additional 10 minutes after the time that we have dated to make sure that you get to listen to some of these next amazing solution-oriented conversations, right? So let's move down to that. So we're now gonna talk about some solutions and accountability, big and small. And so this next panel that I wanna introduce is super exciting. It's actually, most of them are from the Forum for Youth Investment team. So if I can have Mary Ellen Wiggins, Gerard Blue, and Kaylin Langsang with Content by Us. Mary and Gerard are both with the Forum for Youth Investment. And we're gonna just go straight into our conversation here about this great idea that you all have to push for a White House for children and youth. So to start off the conversation, to some folks, they might not be aware of kind of what that means, right? So what precedent would this, first of all, why don't we talk a little bit about what that means, right? And why push for that? But also what precedent would this set in engaging young people via the White House administration in this form?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Marilyn. And this has been so amazing. I just have to say thank you to all the panelists and the poets and everybody who's already spoken. This has just been truly an awesome event. So why even have an office like this in the first place? Well, if you look at the federal government and you try to ask yourself, who's actually responsible for whether young people are thriving? That question doesn't really have an answer. Like, you have the president who is responsible for everything. And then after that, you have people who are responsible for housing or for education or for health or things that are really important, but they're just a piece of a person's life. There actually isn't anybody whose job it is to say, are young people thriving in our country? What does that even mean? And what does that even look like? So the proposal for having a White House Office for Children and Youth is to actually create a center of responsibility. So someone who is a little less busy than president and can actually focus on that as a topic, who can bring together federal agencies. So all of those heads of different agencies that are responsible for all of those different parts of life, to have a coherent conversation and decision-making space to say, how are we helping young people? And that's really important, one, for how government is organized, because when you look at the federal government, the executive branch, there are actually 24 major agencies and a whole bunch of little ones, and there are over 2 million federal employees who are civilians. So there are all these people doing a bunch of stuff. You gotta have a way to bring it together at the top. And then it's also really important for advocates, because right now, when people wanna talk about an issue, you have to figure out which agency covers your issue. And then you have to go knock on all those doors. And then once you get their attention, they don't necessarily have a way to work together on things like gun safety, on hunger, on mental health, things that no single agency owns. So it's really important to have a place in the White House that's really high level, that can create responsibility for the very important and distinct groups of children, adolescents, and young adults, but have a concerted focus on all of them, and that can organize all of those different agencies to make sure that they're really working together and really listening. And I'll hand it over to Gerard to talk a little bit more about what kind of precedent that means for youth engagement and what that might do into the future.
So as Mary Ellen already eloquently stated, having youth and an office for children and youth will help to make sure that the youth voice is heard. We already talked to a couple of the youth panelists who educated us on how important it is to make sure that the youth voice on the ground is heard all the way up to the executive branch and the federal branch. So to make sure that someone is there and speaking on behalf of youth and their voice. One of the things that I've learned when I started working in the opportunity youth space is that tokenizing is a thing that's done by so many organizations, and youth are done with that. They want their voice to be heard and not just to be used, and be able to really change the scope of the work that's happening. So not only having individuals, like Mary Ellen said, who have all of these different jobs and working in all of these different agencies, we have youth actually helping them, informing them of what's the best route and what's the best policy and advocacy aspects they should be implementing.
Yeah, thank you for breaking that down very concisely, Mary Ellen and Gerard. And Gerard, actually, I want to build off of what you just said, because you are very much active in the opportunity youth space. And for those joining us who are not aware of that term, opportunity youth refers to young people between the ages of 16 and 24 who are not in school and not working. So a very important population of young people that we're trying to reconnect to education and employment pathways. So I know that you have been doing a lot of great work around the Reconnecting Youth campaign, which is under the Forum for Youth Investment, in pretty much engaging young people to have agency to speak on some of these things that, for example, appropriations, that some people might not know what that means, but you all as a campaign are kind of doing a lot of the educational component to get young people very active in that. So can you talk a little bit about your work on that campaign and how it does align with the efforts of engaging young people at a higher level?
Yeah, so the Reconnecting Youth campaign focuses on federal appropriations, which is basically the money that the government provides to states and localities for different programs. We focus on opportunity youth programs in the realm of education, training, workforce, apprenticeship, national service, and making sure that they get the most money as possible to reconnect the disconnected youth. As Marlene explained, those individuals who are not in school or not in work. And it can be for several reasons: criminal justice issues, family issues with finances, work stability, homelessness, all of these aspects that create a disconnected youth. We actually work with a lot of the different programs on this call, and we kind of round them up together in order to have those youth tell their story to Congress. We work directly with members of Congress to tell them why it's necessary to increase the funding for those federal appropriations. And we utilize youth from those localities. So they get a chance to say what they're doing, why it's important, why Job Corps was important to them, why their community program that got them back into high school was important to them, in order to convince them that this is necessary and a need. The Reconnect the Youth campaign is expanding and utilizing all of the different aspects and programs that we work with to really work on those policy issues that will also stop disconnecting youth, so that the appropriations aspect can really go to those who are in need.
Thank you, Gerard, for breaking that down so concisely as well. And I just shared a link to Opportunity Youth United, which is one of our partners for this event, an amazing group of young people. Shout out, Kim is a part of OYU. There's a lot of folks on here, and just want to give a shout out to them because they're leading a lot on some of these efforts that Gerard has just mentioned. But to continue on this conversation, you know, aside from trying to create something, like you said, Mary Ellen, that has accountability, I think that at these higher levels, we're still struggling at just even getting youth voices, just stories, right? So I want to bring in Kaylin, who is with Content by Us, to talk a little bit more about why it's so important to create this organization, and really how you have worked with the power of storytelling with youth and young adults on, you know, a different range of not only policy, but amplifying the work that they're doing, and just overall, just them being amazing.
Yeah, so basically, for anyone who doesn't know, Content by Us is this campaign that we're doing that's kind of at its core just like elevating underrepresented youth voices, and especially like underrepresented youth artists. I know that, to name a few, Matthew and Natalia, the poets who performed today, we actually got them from our Creators Network and gave them this opportunity to like perform and like get their stuff out there, because they're like such awesome poets. But it's just like, sometimes it's just a matter of having a platform to, you know, like get your ideas out there and express yourself in your own perspective. And I think that what we're hearing a lot of in this panel generally is that storytelling is like such a huge part of like any advocacy work. Like it's at the heart of like, I think like literally everyone's work here is like storytelling. And I think at Content by Us and like the Future We Need, which is like also giving like folks a platform like this to just like get their stuff out there and like try to put our heads together to try to create solutions for all of these issues that we're facing. I think at the core of it is just like sustainable empowerment. Like, you know, I think something we've also seen, especially like since it was an election year and like also with the Georgia runoffs, is that sometimes it's like a majority of people are only going to pay attention to an underrepresented group when they're suffering, or when they're suffering in the fight for change. And it's just like, there's so much more to people than the ways that they suffer and the ways that they need to advocate for their own communities. And I think something that we want to highlight through the work that we're doing with Content by Us is literally just like elevating the voices of underrepresented creators who are doing the work on the ground, and showing that, you know, they're real, like three-dimensional people that aren't like fighting all the time. Like something that I have like kind of like gained from my limited interactions with folks who like incorporate art into their activism is that, you know, advocating and fighting for change doesn't always need to be a painful struggle. Like you can still find ways to express all of the ways that, you know, you're thriving as a person, your community is like thriving and finding light within itself. And I just think like that's honestly so powerful. Like as underrepresented young people, it's finding light and love and peace and joy in basically a nation that was designed to rob us of it is so important. and we should be celebrating that like with the importance that it holds all the time, not just when these communities are suffering or fighting. And yeah, that was a long spiel. Basically, that's the hard one.
That was so beautifully said, Kaylin. And you're hitting on a very important point, is that why do we have to highlight young people, like you said, when it's always some tragedy, right? Young people are always doing the work. This is not a 9-to-5 job. You know, a lot of the people on here, we work, you know, nights, you know, tears, sweat, like we're there because this work never ends. And it also touches on the reason that Content by Us is needed. Forum for Youth Investment, CLASP, all these other organizations, Opportunity United, is because at a thread of all of this, including what's being proposed for the White House of Children and Youth Office, is being able to contribute to a narrative that's not always toxic, that's not always based on these myths of young people always being portrayed on the negative light. Like there's so much more to us than these kind of stereotypes that they always want to give youth and young adults. And, you know, even when it comes to, you know, basic healthcare, for example, they think that because we're young, we're healthy. Like that's nowhere near the reality. Like we saw the numbers that Nia has shared with us with CLASP and the reality of what young people are facing. So like you said, Kaylin, this all gets connected by sharing experiences and letting folks know that this is what young people need and want. And that is seen through the lobbying efforts, our Reconnecting Youth campaign, when they bring the young people to speak with members of Congress, obviously through this initiative that Mary Ellen is proposing for accountability, and then, you know, Kaylin through the content producing of just getting the story out. So you all three are part of a multi-level kind of like strategy that is needed, right? And so this kind of really sets us up to the next conversation that is aligned to what we just talked about, because the next conversation will, Dylan will be introducing us on how, you know, I'm always game for multiple ways for accountability. And this next conversation is just that, how to have something that's also independent in the same vein to make sure that young people are heard.
Thanks so much, Marlon. Thank you to all my colleagues at the forum, Content by Us too. And now for a conversation from the hashtag Youth in Gov Coalition, an effort led by youth-led organizations who are calling on the Biden-Harris administration to bring young people to the table. Joining us are a few folks from that coalition: Jasmine Kay, Executive Director of 18 by Vote; Bo Macchiel, who formerly worked in the Office of Public Engagement at the White House; and Merritt Jones, Senior Advisor of Student Voice. Merritt, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Don. I am joined by Jasmine and maybe Bo, we'll see, but we know you're over time. So just want to be able to turn over to you, Jasmine, to say, can you just walk us briefly through this campaign and the main goals?
Good. Okay, we do have Bo. Hey, Bo. Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the most important things that I've seen through my work with young people is that it's not enough just to listen to them. We also need to have tangible pathways for them to be able to have a seat at the table. So this whole memo basically looks at how we can institutionalize youth engagement. So there are three kind of main things. First is looking at an office for young Americans, and within that is having a director of youth engagement, particularly someone who is Gen Z focused. And so that it can really also be an independent body there, so it's also doing DPC and working within policy things beyond just engagement. And then I also will, Mary, if you want to kind of talk about some of the interagency pieces, I think that would work too.
Yeah, I'll just say the biggest thing we noticed was that the White House alone can't do all the work, and agencies like the Department of Ed and HHS, who's historically engaged young people, and HUD and USDA, who runs 4-H and these other youth programming, we knew that there needed to be alignment and that this needed to last beyond Biden. And if we're going to do this right, it needs to have infrastructure in all the agencies as well as the White House. And the way you do that is through personnel, which I'll have Bo share a little bit about.
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Bo Macchiel again, and we used to work in the Obama administration and worked in the Office of Public Engagement. I got my job at 24 years old, and I think I heard Nia West Bay say budgets are demonstrative of values, and I'd also say that personnel is also demonstrative of values. Young Americans have been greatly impacted, and we've seen their role within the election and being able to mobilize and also fight for issues that are disproportionately going to affect them, whether that's COVID, whether that's climate change, but how are we really focusing in on ensuring that young Americans are spread out throughout government, and how are we being intentional in doing that. And this Youth in Government, Youth in Gov coalition has come together through the three pillars that Jasmine and Merritt just talked about. One, having an office dedicated solely to young Americans. Two, really ensuring that we have an interagency working group to be able to show where young Americans can make impact and where the policy decisions that they need to help implement in the federal government. And then three, also making sure that we're ensuring that there's a pipeline of young Americans who can start from different levels, whether it's beginning, medium, or also given huge leadership roles within government. And this coalition really wants to make sure that we have a dedicated person within PPO to be able to make sure that we're building that pipeline and addressing those issues that young Americans really care about.
And I know we're at time here, so we'll just say, if you want to get involved, the easiest thing you can do is go to our website and sign on for updates. We're getting updates out to the coalition, hopefully pretty regularly, so that folks know what's happening, how to push. There'll be a broader public push. And the best way to do that is adding your name to the website so that you can get updates. And then the other piece is, if you're here representing an organization that isn't currently involved, we've built out a coalition of over 30 youth-driven organizations that range from climate to education justice to gender equity and gun violence prevention, and so many in between. And, this is an issue that we all can agree on, that young people need to be represented in this administration and many administrations to come. So we're really trying to build out as broad of a coalition as possible. And you'll find the links in the chat. And I'm also going to drop the Google form, which will allow us to get your organization on the website quickly and really work together to do this. Any final thoughts, Jasmine or Bo?
I'll give some final thoughts. I would just say it's, be a part of this coalition, get your organizations involved. Young American groups and young American advocacy groups are essential to making sure that government works and does the things and accomplishes the policy goals that we need. We need folks on the outside and also on the inside to ensure that, these policy decisions that we really pushed for, Congress or the federal government to ensure, that we also need to be a part of these policymaking solutions. So thanks again, Jasmine and Merritt, for your leadership in Youth in Gov. I don't think we'd have the coalition without you all. So looking forward to continuing to work with you and all these other folks on the call.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, everyone on this call who's also been a partner, and Bo and Merritt. And I would just say, generally, we really hope that this can also be a tool to help demystify government. I know for me, even the word bureaucracy seems complicated and confusing. And the federal government is confusing, and it wasn't necessarily designed, even though government should be designed for us, it wasn't necessarily designed to be inclusive and accessible to everyone. And so I think one of our biggest goals throughout all of this is ensuring that any young person knows where to start, how to engage, and that we're building out these systems. So it goes beyond, again, these next 4 years, right? We have a platform right now with the Biden-Harris administration, but we need to build out these systems. We need to build these structures so we can transform government beyond even these next 4 years. But I think we have a really great opportunity now, and we want to make sure that we are representing as many people as possible. So please reach out to us, let us know how we can help amplify voices and try and build bridges within the federal government for more young folks. And thank you all for convening this space.
Yes. Wow, thank you for doing that so efficiently and so well. And I looked on the comments, and so many people were like, this is a great idea, commenting other things that they could add. And again, these are two different ways of approach, reaching accountability that align, right? One inside, one independent. So please, please, please reach out, and we will be sending all this information out. We do have some couple call to actions from our partners that we will be sharing on the chat. If you click on the link, you will find different things from different partners that they have asked us to share out. So I will just quickly read some of them, and we will conclude the night. So for example, the Future We Need campaign, that's a lot of us who are facilitating, me and Dylan. If you want to be a partner, and maybe we do more of these kind of spaces for young people to have different conversations, join us, reach out to us. We can definitely find ways to partner and amplify a lot of the content of young people that are doing on the ground. Let's do it, reach out to partner. Reconnecting Youth campaign. You heard a lot about what Gerard said and what they're leading. If you know people who are part of that population of opportunity youth, or you work with those kind of youth as allies here on the call, please check out the Reconnecting Youth campaign and join them as well. CLASP's new deal for youth. A lot of you wanted to check out that data. Again, like I said, we will be sharing a video promotion of that work as well, and they're also our partners. We also have another call to action from Youth in Gov, which we just heard, to please sign the petition and join their campaign as well. Also, Student Debt Crisis, they have a petition to tell Joe Biden to cancel student debt by executive action. That's another link that will be shared. All the call to actions, like Dylan said, are on that link that you click on the Future We Need. And the last one is, if you are a young progressive LGBTQ interested in running for office, check out Pride in Running. They are launching a website very soon, but right now, if you go to their Instagram, @Pride in Running, all together lowercase, you can check out what they're trying to put together right now. Yes, thank you, Kaylin. So these are just some of the call to actions that are smaller that you can jump into a campaign, but we also have bigger solutions, which is joining a coalition for some of these broader accountability of engaging young people at the federal level. So I'm just gonna and actually give Dylan the last word to say if he wants to give any last thoughts. And you know, we hope that we can stay in touch and continue this conversation.
Thanks, Marlon. I think no last word except thank you all for joining us. And I'm excited about continuing spaces like this, very intentionally youth-led, but bringing in adult allies who, again, I think folks have hopefully used direct messages to connect with one another. As a follow-up, we'll have some additional ways to take action, and we're excited about, again, continuing spaces like these. So thank you all for joining us. And I know Marlon and I may stick around for those who kind of want to chat. So thank you all for joining us, and have a great night.